Transmite para usted Radio Anáhuac Querétaro, transmitiendo desde el Centro de Medios de la Universidad Anáhuac Querétaro, ubicada en Circuito Universidades número 1, El Marqués Querétaro, una estación de la Escuela de Comunicación y Dirección de Empresas de Entretenimiento de la Universidad Anáhuac Querétaro.
Orden en la sala. Inicia la sesión. Esto es Viviendo Derecho, a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, Tuesday, as every Tuesday, we have our emission, Viviendo Derecho. The emission from the Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad Anáhuac Querétaro, broadcasting from the studio of the School of Communication. This elegant and luxury studio. Today we have an international broadcast. We have a splendid person from India, Professor Manjeri Subin. He will tell us how should we pronounce his name. And we have Dr. Professor Adriana Expósito from Universidad de Almería. She's been with us many times. And we shall talk about India, specifically the environment in India. But about India. India is, let me tell you, a very unknown country for us. And we shall repair that weakness in our culture. Let me thank the general coordination of José Pablo Hernández and the control of the instruments of Sofía Afid. Thank you very much. Well, we are going now to a very brief cut, and we'll be back in just a few seconds.
Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho, a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos. Observatorio Jurídico. Viendo las cosas con el ojo derecho.
Okay, let's begin. Professor Manjeri Subin, how should we pronounce your name?
Hello, Professor. Hello, Ariana. I think, Professor, you've done a pretty good job in pronouncing my name the way it is. It is Manjeri Subin Sundaraj. I've got a long name, especially for someone from India.
Okay. We will refer to you as Subin, okay?
Yes, Professor. That's how I would be addressed here in India as well.
Lovely. Dr. Ariana, how should we pronounce your name?
Hello, doctor. It's a pleasure to stay with you today and to share the program with the doctors Subin.
We are very happy, Subin. We are very happy, honestly, to have you here to talk to us about a country that we read literature, we see pictures, but we know a little. just a little from India. So we are very interested in hearing you.
The pleasure is all mine, Professor, to kind of enlighten you and the rest of the people a little bit about my country. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, how about if we start with this? I admire plenty the Indian democracy. How do you do to keep that strong democracy? We've read that you are the country with the population, with the largest population under a democrat regime. How is that possible?
True, Professor. I think we are the largest democracy in the world with a little over a billion people in India. One of the basic things which I think we should be understanding and keeping in mind is that while we came up with a constitution, I think it has been specifically mentioned that we, the people, give onto ourselves this constitution. So, which means that we ensure that the people, the citizens of India, are very powerful. In a sense that we kind of ensure that those who are elected representatives kind of represent the citizens, and they are said to be the voice of the common people. So in that sense, I would say that it would be really good if we do understand the whole process. Wherein, for example, if I were to say any person who is 18 years can vote in an election, and they can ensure that the person or the party whom they would like to be in power is being voted to power. So an indirect representation of the people in India is what is being looked into. And that being said, I wouldn't say that all politicians necessarily do work well for the betterment of the people, but then most of them do. And I think that's the very basis and the strongest point as far as democracy in India is concerned. We kind of ensure that, well, every 5 years we have a general election. And that's when you kind of exercise your right to vote and ensure that, well, there is a set of people who would form the government and who would work for the betterment of the people. So that, I think, kind of sums up as to why we have been following the democratic way in a pretty good way, I guess, for a long period.
You know, in Mexico, we have 200 years pretending to have free elections, just pretending we have understandable parties, but the truth is that we if you are, let me say this, if you are an adult democracy, we are about in kindergarten. And I don't know why. I think we have many things in common. I mean, social differences, racial differences, economic differences, but your commitment to democracy, I just admire that.
Probably, I think one of the very reasons as to why we stick on to this form of the government is that we haven't had a chance of having any other form of government. Ever since we became independent in 1947, after almost 2 centuries under the British rule, I think a democratic government was the only thing that we have been used to. So that can also be one of the main reasons, because we, as I did point out earlier, we haven't had any other form of government apart from a democratic one. And I don't think that we would move on to any other form of government as well in the near future, at least. That, I guess, is the hallmark that the Indian democratic system does have. A lesson for other countries, I guess, to learn and follow.
Okay, so something has to do the British presence, I think, in the past.
I'm sorry, Professor. I didn't hear you properly.
Uh, I was saying you did have the British there as we have the Spaniards, and the
Yes.
British maybe left on you some influence.
Yeah, I think the if you were to look into some of those legal aspects which India does follow as of now, we do follow the common law system. So while we were under the British rule for a pretty long time, more than 200 years, I think we have kind of borrowed many of those aspects of the law as well. And the democratic system of government that we do have does have a little bit of, I would say, a mix of a number of countries that did exist at that point of time, which kind of followed a democratic way. And we thought maybe after a couple of centuries under colonial rule, that would be the best way in which we could, uh, I would say, develop as a country. And the leaders that we did have, I'm sure that you must have heard Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, our father of a nation. So he was also very particular that, well, the people and their ideas and their concerns should be addressed. And you need a form of government which kind of ensures that the people themselves would be treated as a sovereign. And that, I guess, is the hallmark of the Indian democratic system.
Uh, Maybe it was important in your recent history that Mahatma Gandhi, the great leader, didn't take any post in the government ever.
No, he did not. I don't think he was too much interested in politics. Another thing which we should be keeping in mind is within a year of India becoming independent, he was assassinated as well. Now, he was a person, all said and done, he was a person who was not very keen on politics or power. But then, given the fact that he didn't live to see long an independent India, I think there's no question of him coming into politics or kind of trying to kind of put across as to how India as a country should perform.
Yes, absolutely. Because he was a leader that wasn't interested in taking power for himself, but to be the spiritual of the movement.
True, Professor. I think many of those ideas which he did profess as well kind of found a place in the many laws that we do have. When he spoke about non-violence, when he spoke about the way in which you kind of ensure that laws are to be treated as the highest in the society, wherein anyone is supposed to follow the law. I think those are some of the ideas which he did give, and those were some of the ideas which did find a place in the Indian Constitution as well. Now, the Constitution of India was drafted under the chairmanship of another great leader that we did have, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who in India, I'm sure that you must know about this. We do have some sort of a caste system as well, wherein you have certain upper castes and certain lower castes who are treated as untouchables. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was one of those persons who belonged to a lower caste, but then he did pursue an education. He was very well qualified, and I think he did bring about his whole set of experience and expertise, which he did gain during his studies in the UK, into drafting the constitution as well. So many of those aspects that you do see as far as being a democratic country, as far as providing for certain rights and duties, I guess for all that we have to be a bit thankful to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the father of the Indian Constitution.
Magnific. We are going now to our first break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.
Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos. Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos.
Professor Subin, I pick these songs from YouTube. I hope they are really Indian songs. Well, let me read you a message from the audience. Professor Marco Garcia, a professor of us, he's a former ambassador in several countries. He says, regards to Dr. Subin in India, a unique, great and beautiful country with deep cultural roots and traditions, but also incredibly modern innovations. Of course, also regards to Dr. Expósito in Spain, another great and beautiful country with strong links with Mexico. Well, messages from the audience, I said. Dr. Expósito.
Yeah, doctor. Yeah. At the same, similar to the doctor, I am a passionate of your country, but more in your culture. I am really keen on the mix of the traditional culture and the new innovation. How to the new technologies are involved in the traditional culture. For me, this is is a passionate. We have problem. Okay.
Dr. Subin, are you listening?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was
yeah.
some sort of a lag, so I couldn't hear it properly.
Okay, okay.
I'm so sorry.
Um, Dr. Exposito, isn't it true that federation is kind of government for a country that has different groups, different races, different languages, as in Spain? But you are not federation, and India is a federation.
Yeah, well, the difference in Spain, we have the regions. We have regions. Something similar like regions is common to federation. The only difference is this region don't have different or unique justice. You don't you don't understand? The only difference with the state federation in Spain is the community of the region, our region, don't have a specific tribunal or tribunal of justice. But it's so similar. The system is so similar.
Yes, Professor Subin, the issue is about that in India you have, as I understand, different languages, different races, different religions, and perhaps the federal system that you have is part of the formula to be successful in the political structure.
True that, Professor. I think one of the major problems that we did have when we became independent was how to kind of join different areas which were under the British Empire and then form a new country. As you did point out, we have a number of languages, we have different religions, we are culturally very diverse, and we are a big country. Now, when the reconstruction was done, I think the main idea that was kept in mind as far as India is concerned is to divide the country into different states based on the language that they did have, which means that, well, for example, if we have around 26 states in India currently. Now, when I say about this particular division as far as the language is concerned, the language that I speak in my state is not the same as the language that I speak in the state that I currently work, which means that people from different states, they really don't know, or they don't have a common language at all. And most often than not, we kind of ensure that we communicate to each other in English. Now, that's one of the main reasons as to why all the laws that we do have in India are basically made in English, because that is one of the common languages that we all do understand. Apart from uh, Hindi, which is the most widely spoken language in India, Under the constitution itself, I think we have around 15 or 16 different languages which have been specifically mentioned. So we don't have a national language as such. We have all these 16 languages which are treated as official languages. And because of the fact that we were under Britain for a long period of time, I think English is the most commonly used language as far as communications or whether it be law or anything of that sort. Because that is the one language which people across India do understand.
And in the parliament, do you have a translation or you tend to speak only one language? How do you manage that?
No, in the parliament, as you did point out, we do have translations because otherwise it becomes very difficult for the people to understand what is happening as well. So there would be just like before World Forums, wherein you do have simultaneous translations that are going on. In the Indian Parliament too, you do have simultaneous translations. So if a person, for example, in South India, if they speak a particular language, well, that would be at that point of time, most often they're not translated to the Hindi, which the majority of the country would be aware of. So that's how things work out in the parliament.
It's curious.
No, I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah. And as I did point out, you can see many of those discussions which happen in the parliament also to be in English, because that is, as I did say earlier, that is one common language which the majority of the people do understand.
It's curious, doctor, for us, for example, that people, our country who don't speak the same language or don't speak the unique language is able to manage a political situation and build a democracy is something curious because, for example, in Spain we have the problem that people speak different language, and we have a problem with this because somewhere they found this like a symbol of different, like a symbol of a situation that give them privilege. For example, in your country, this is a way to communicate. It's not a problem. It's not something to solve.
It is not an issue, but then there are certain problems that do exist in this particular situation as well. For example, currently, based on the language setting, you do have certain sections of the society which are part of a particular state wanting to come out with a new state. I mean, because of the fact that they speak another language. So that kind of a problem certainly does exist in India currently. But then given the fact that it's not pretty easy to come out or rather ensure that a new state is carved out of an existing state, I think things are a little bit on a rest. But then you never know when they'll pop up again.
Well, we must go to our second break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos.
Nadi ਗਲੀਆਂ ਪਾਰ ਸਜਣ ਦਾ ਠਾਣਾ ਕੀਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਜਾਣਾ ਕੀਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਜਾਣਾ ਦਿਲ ਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਬੇਪਰਵਾਹ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਿਲ ਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਬੇਪਰਵਾਹ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਿਲ ਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਬੇਪਰਵਾਹ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਿਲ ਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਬੇਪਰਵਾਹ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ
Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos. La voz del aprendizaje. La voz del que quiere saber más. Nuestros alumnos.
Well, allow me to read about the public. Vanessa Cruz says hello. Mariana Gallo, Maria Eugenia, they say hello. Well, Professor Subin, the environment in India, your biodiversity, your geography. India comes from the top of the world in the Everest. You have deserts, you have rainforest, you have everything. How do you face legally and economically the protection of your environment, your biodiversity?
As I did point out earlier, Professor, when we came out with this constitution in India for the very first time, we didn't have anything about protecting the environment over there. I guess as a country which was under colonial rule for a long period of time, the first and the foremost idea that we did have was to ensure that we develop. Maybe that was a reason as to why you did not think a little bit more about protecting the environment. Now, I think it was only in 1976, after 26 years of the constitution coming into force, that you thought of bringing about some sort of provision as far as protecting the environment is concerned. And I did mention that being a democratic country, the country also did have an equal responsibility, just like we citizens do have, in ensuring that the environment is being protected. So by way of the 42nd Amendment in 1976, the Indian Constitution kind of laid down a specific duty which the state did have as far as protecting the environment is concerned. Article 48, capital A of the Indian Constitution speaks about this duty and the responsibility that the state did have as far as protecting the environment is concerned. Similarly, as you would really want it to be, the duty was something that was not limited to the state itself. We, the citizens of India, also were given a fundamental duty to ensure that we do end up protecting the environment. So we do have a part called as a fundamental duties under the Constitution. And under this particular head, you kind of, by virtue of a particular article, Article 51A, subclause G, it says that, well, citizens of India are also to protect and improve the natural environment. Now, I would say that if you look into the number of laws that we do have in India, there are absolutely no dearth of laws. The only problem that we do have is the way in which all these laws that are there, especially as far as protecting the environment is concerned, is properly implemented. Now, also, I would like to point out that, well, it is not only a question of it being implemented too in certain situations. Citizens like us, do we have that kind of an urge wherein we need to protect the environment? Do we really think about protecting the environment? I think it's always been since all of us, I would say, would agree that India too is a developing nation, the question is as regards, I mean, as the conflict that would happen between development on one hand and environmental protection on the other. So, how do we balance this particular problem? Well, we do have certain laws which kind of say that, well, the environment has to be protected, even if there are, I'm sorry, even if there is some sort of a scope as far as development is concerned. But to bring about or strike this balance in the right sense, I think that is one major question which we do have to answer. And every now and then, not just the legislature, but then the judiciary as well as the executive tries to do something in order to ensure that the environment is protected. But at the same time, you do ensure the concept of development too. So economically, if you were to look at it, I would say that a number of activities do take place as far as ensuring that India's economy grows. But at the same time, you do have a little bit of a safeguard as well from an environmental point of
Very interesting, and you make me remember that many present issues were not provided in constitutions because the issue wasn't present in the time the constitution was issued. I mean, the environment laws are very modern. Isn't it?
True that, Professor. Yes, true. Now, if you were to look into some of those concerns that we did have as far as environment law is concerned, as opposed to the Constitution, I would say that, as I did point out earlier, you do have Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which speaks about your life and liberty. You have it's a fundamental right that we do have. It speaks about the right to life and personal liberty that people in India do have. Now, unlike the South African Constitution, which specifically talks about a right to live in a healthy environment, the Indian Constitution doesn't have a specific right. What the courts have done time and again is that they have kind of read into Article 21, the right to life, the right to live in a healthy environment as well. So I would say that Article 21 is treated as some kind of a repository of rights wherein you do read a number of rights that you do have and say that, well, it forms part and parcel of your right to life. The right to live in a healthy environment is also seen as one such right. So even if we don't have a specific right, I think courts, both the Supreme Court as well as the high courts that we do have in each state in India, they kind of follow this very aspect and say that, well, yes, there is a right to live in a healthy environment, and this right is something which has to be protected. Now, it being a fundamental right, if my right to live in a healthy environment is being violated in any sense, I, as a citizen, can approach the court, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the country, or the highest court in the state, the high courts, and say that, well, my fundamental right has been violated. So you do have an option to file a writ petition before the High Court or the Supreme Court, alleging that, well, your right to live in a healthy environment has been violated. In short, you can say that your Article 21 has been violated and you can seek for some sort of a constitutional remedy.
Certainly, it is very important what you say all over this conversation, that the institutions should be independent from each other. It should be focused on their own authority and not be bound or even worse undermined by the other powers, the executive mainly. It is very important that the institutions works on their function, not on the interest of any other institution or group or party.
True that, Professor. I think that is one of those cardinal ideas based on which the Indian Constitution also functions. Now, in India, I'm sure that, like many other countries, we do have three wings: the legislature, the judiciary, as well as the executive. And separation of powers between each of these three different bodies is one of those ideas which has been mentioned in the Constitution and which we as a country do adhere to quite vehemently. So, as you did rightly point out, separation of powers is something which is very important, and we at India kind of ensure that this kind of separation does exist. So, you have the legislature which comes out with the laws, you have the executive which kind of ensures that these laws are implemented, and you have the judiciary to kind of ensure that these laws are interpreted. And if at all there is a problem, well, you kind of tell or give a decision as to how the problem is to be looked into.
Amazing, amazing. And the environmental laws and authorities are national or are participation of the states and of the cities?
Okay. Now, if I were to talk about environmental related legislations, I would say that in India, the parliament speaks about three different lists, which means that there are certain lists out of the three under which you have certain ideas, certain areas of law on which the state legislature only can come up with a law, which is list 2. List 1 is a list which includes a number of ideas where the Parliament of India, the Union Government's Parliament of India, can come out with the law. List 3 is a set of ideas wherein you can ensure that it can either be the state legislature which comes out with the law, or it can be the Union Parliament as well. But if the Parliament comes out with the law, that would prevail over the state legislation. Now, as far as environmental laws are concerned, I think most of those laws are made in such a way that you do have it made by the Parliament of India. Now, you also do have situations arising because of this particular scenario that existed in India, wherein I would say that some of these ideas are definitely within the scope and ambit of the state legislature. But Article 253 of the Indian Constitution says, if two or more states, they go and ask the center to make a law on something which is coming under the ambit of a state, well, in such a situation, the center can come out with such a legislation. Most of the pollution control related legislations that we do have in India follow suit. And though it is a state legislature which can come up with a law, based on the request that was made by the state legislatures to the parliament, well, the parliament came out with a legislation. So I would say that legislation, as far as from an environmental perspective, is something which has been the forte of both the Union Parliament as well as the state legislature. Both of them have come up with a number of laws. India is a country wherein you don't have a dearth of laws. I would say the problem that we do face is the way in which laws are to be implemented properly. I think that's what we lack. You have a number of laws, but then how exactly do you make them work? How exactly are these laws to be put in place? I think that's the challenge that we do have. So both the Union Parliament, the state legislature, all of those, put together kind of ensure that a robust legal system exists in India.
It seems a very good system of checks and balances in transversal and vertical. Very interesting. Let's go to our last break, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes.
Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía. tus sentidos.
मैंने तेरे लिए छोड़ा है ज़माना, ज़रा तेरा इरादा तो बता। ऐसे नजरे तुम मुझसे चुराना, ज़रा तेरा इरादा तो बता। छाया है मुझ पे तेरा ही नशा, कम वक्त दिल ये कहाँ जा फंसा। मैं तेरी दीवानी तू मेरा दीवाना, समझ ले नजर का इशारा। गली गली में फिरता है तू, क्यों बन के बंजारा। आ मेरे दिल में बस जा, मेरे आशिक आवारा। तेरा कसूर है ना मेरा कसूर, दोनों के दोनों पास हो के भी दूर। तेरी वजह से मैं तो सोई नहीं, मेरी वजह से तू भी जागा जरूर। तू मेरी मोहब्बत से बच ना सकेगा, समझ जाने मन ये इशारा। गली गली में फिरता है तू, क्यों बन के बंजारा। हे मेरे दिल में बस जा, मेरे आशिक आवारा।
Orden en la sala. Estás escuchando Viviendo Derecho a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos. ¿Qué hay de nuevo? ¿Qué está pasando hoy en día? Mantente actualizado con nuestras novedades.
Well, we are back. Let me tell you, dear professor, my wife says that she understands you very well. She doesn't says the same about me. Never mind. That happens. Well, Professor Garcia says, which are the three more relevant environmental issues in India? Well, we'll be back with this. I believe Dr. Exposito is about to tell us something.
Yeah, it's just the question that I am going to say. Dr. Sabine, what think you are is the highest environmental problem in your country, or which needs a better development laws?
Better development?
A law or a legal or
Okay.
a legal more specific or particularly.
Okay. Currently, I think one of those steps which India is taking on an environmental front is about rights of nature. So I'm sure that in many parts of the globe, you do have this kind of a movement taking shape. Now, India, I would say, is, as far as rights of nature is concerned, is very much in an infant stage. It's just beginning. And we have had instances of rivers, for example, being given legal personality to be treated as a legal entity. You do have decisions of the high courts in different states kind of putting across this kind of an idea wherein rivers are given legal personalities, animals are given some sort of a legal status. You do have the matter pending before the Supreme Court of India, which is the highest court. And hopefully, we can expect a positive outcome from the Supreme Court of India as well, which I think would be able to change the whole legal landscape as far as environmental laws are concerned. Now, that being said, I do think we do have a number of other problems as well. As I did point out while I was responding to one of those questions that was posed earlier, the problem that we do have in India is the way in which laws are to be properly implemented. And maybe because of the fact that we Indians, as citizens, we don't understand the reason or the rationale behind the law. You tend to ensure that, well, is there any way in which I can break the law? I can ensure that if I do something wrong, I will not be caught. I think that is what we are more concerned about. And if we can ourselves change this attitude, I think that would be a better situation, a better uh, a better picture would come across to ensure that law itself works a little bit, I would say, in the way in which it should.
Well, I see. In Spain, we have a similar problem. We have a lot of laws, but the problem is the implementation. And this is the question, it's the great question, the highest great question. Because the problem isn't the law, and the law is here, no? It's not the problem. The problem is the implementation, how people do the law and make the right thing, no? No, it is the problem. I think in Mexico, the problem is so similar, no, doctor?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you two make me remember that in Mexico there's some kind of fashion that the law offices, the large ones, have a department of compliance. But I'm afraid that these people works to tell the companies how to pollute without being sanctioned, not how to not pollute.
I think that's the same everywhere, Professor.
Well,
Really?
what should we do?
Well, I would say that, well, the only way in which you can bring about a change, as Mahatma Gandhi did say, is be the change that you want others to. If we kind of bring about that change in ourselves, which we want to see elsewhere, I think that's where you all start.
It's a good start, I feel so.
So, following our Professor Garcia, he should be here. He's making a lot of messages, very fine messages. Well, the environment actually doesn't have borders. How should we deal with the United States and China mainly? No, how what should we do?
Doctor, the first thing that they have to do is read our book. I think this is the first step to change their minds and start to a new beginning. I think
That's true. We are about to have a book written by we three, another 9 or 10 people from around the world, that we are facing the issue of the environment. But Professor Subin, in well, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. What comes to your mind on the issue of what to do in the near future to protect the environment?
I think in the near future, what the plan that we do have is to is to clearly understand that, well, unless, of course, something is done at this point of time, we might not be in a position to protect the environment. While I do teach my students, I always tell them this particular aspect. See, I think we are fighting a losing battle. It's not that we would win this battle. Probably the only thing that we'll be able to do is prolong the inevitable. I'm sure that at a particular point of time, it would be uh, not possible for us to survive in this particular place as it is. Some of those actions which we can do right now is to ensure that we kind of help or lend a helping hand as far as the environment is concerned, ensure that it is given a little bit of protection, ensure that you do have laws which are made in order to protect the environment for itself rather than looking it from a human centric perspective. I think that is one major change which laws are to bring about. All these laws that we do have speak about a right to live in a healthy environment. Now, what does it mean? It, I would say, kind of puts across the right to live in a healthy environment from a human perspective. Let's move on from this right to live in a healthy environment to, say, the right of environment. I think it's high time that we consider the environment as a living entity, give it some sort of a right, and ensure that it is protected for its own sake, not for human sake. I think that's the least that we can do as far as the environment is concerned. Given that it has helped us a lot, it still continues to do.
For humanity's sake. Lovely. Lovely, absolutely lovely. Well, I have a bad thinking. How do you say in English? The inclination to the wrong. Let's consider Professor Subin, Professor Exposito, let's organize next year an international seminar on environmental issues. Not only law, but economic, but science, chemical, physical, an international seminar that maybe we here in this university may host and to broadcast to all over the world. How do you think?
I think that's a very good idea, Professor. I think we should be doing that.
Doctor, you don't have any work. You only want to give more and more work. It's impossible to work with you.
Well, always we'll have time to sleep. Let's leave that for another day.
I will have time to sleep.
Well, we just have time to thank to our wonderful visitors of today. Professor Exposito, thank you very much. Professor Subin, we appreciate very much not only your time, but your night time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you, Ariana, as well.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to stay with you today, and also with the Dr. Vargas.
Well, with this, we say goodbye. Let's meet all us in next week. Thank you very much.
Se levanta la sesión. Esto fue Viviendo Derecho. Te esperamos el próximo martes de 12 a 1 de la tarde a través de Radio Anáhuac Querétaro. Amplía tus sentidos.